Hi guys, welcome back to the Earthly Delights podcast, where today we have a special friend, a good friend, maybe over 10 years in the making, this friendship, maybe even longer, showing my relative age, but it's Dolapo Adeladan, people. Welcome, Dolapo Adeladan, to the Earthly Delights podcast.
Hey, what is up, everyone?
What's the crack? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing very, very well. I'm glad to be on the Earthly Delights podcast. It's a pleasure to be on here. So, yeah, man.
For people who don't know about you, give us a bit about yourself. I know this is going to be hard because you were telling Jim before, but you do about 3 million things. But if you could tell those people what those 3 million things are, then that would be really handy.
Yeah, most definitely.
Put it like this: me and Dolapo share one of our pastimes is modelling. I happen to do hand modelling. Dolapo does a little bit different, but that's one of our shared pastimes.
Right? Yeah. So pretty much right now, my main job is as an engineer. So currently, I work for a tech company. I studied chemical engineering in school. And so that's where I kind of stemmed off into that industry. On the side, I've recently I've had a podcast for about 3 years. So I have a podcast called Kings and Queens that I do on the side. And on top of that, I also model as well. So do a lot of shoots with different photographers in the Austin, Texas area, Dallas, Texas area, Houston, Texas area. So just trying to get my feet wet in that and try to see where it goes with that. But yeah, it's been good. I try to do a number of different things to see what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, and I feel like life is too short to just stick to one thing. I feel like you should kind of venture off and try different things, and whatever you feel is your main purpose in life, that's where you should go ahead and pursue.
For sure. And listen, if I had your body, I'd be modelling as well. So agree. He's had the same body since he was 16, been yoked ever since. But yeah, it's go. We'll put his Instagram in the profile, so any of you ladies or gentlemen who want to check him out, it's all there. Just come prepared, is what I'm saying. But
Oh man.
yeah. So Dolapo, obviously me and you, we met each other. Can't remember my exact age, but I was probably around like 12 or 13, short and chubby, so not much has changed there. And maybe just a bit more hair and less of a beard. And you came over from America, and you were like this exotic new student with this new accent, and everyone was like, it wound up all the guys because everyone was like, this fucking guy, man, he just walks into a room and he just says something stupid, but as long as it's in an American accent, the girls just go weak at the knees. So we go. Yeah. That's how far we go back. But yeah. So how I wanted to obviously that. People will guess, obviously, well, not guess, they'll see from the title of this podcast that where we're going to kind of focus this podcast on is race and heritage. And, you're one of the few people who's probably spent like a lot of time in America and quite a substantial amount of time as well in the UK. And I wondered, to you as like a black man in both countries, were there any like substantial differences that stood out? Was one country, I don't know, better or worse when it came to race relations and how whether you felt more accepted in one country or vice versa? I don't know. How did you feel like when you compare the two?
So if I compare, my experience in, I guess, the UK, I feel like the black people over there, you definitely, you kind of find, your who in terms of descent, or because you have black people, you have specific places for which where each black person is from. So myself, I'm Nigerian, so when I got to the UK, what am I going to do? I'm going to look for people who are like me. I'm looking for Nigerian people who I can kind of vibe with in that aspect. But obviously, you have people that are from Ghana or Jamaica. You have different people, but I think that it's when it comes to me, being comfortable, it was kind of in the UK it was a little bit more difficult because there's not as many, I guess, of black people, as opposed to in America. America's big. You have different locations, different places to where you'll migrate to see black people, or it's kind of more of a mixing pot as opposed to the UK. So comfortability wise, I would say the US in terms of race. But I didn't feel out of place with the UK either because, I was actually born in the UK. So, I can adapt to different locations very easily. So for me, it wasn't even that bad. I like, talking to people with different races as well. So I didn't feel, too out of place in that respect.
Yeah. It's worth pointing out for people who don't know as well, like when Dolapo came over to England, it wasn't as if he came to school in London where obviously it's a lot more multicultural. He came to Skegness, which would be like, it's the equivalent of like English redneck country. Do you know what I mean? It's basically the same. It's basically the same. Yeah. So I mean, that's probably where the lack of multiculturality. I mean, I was exotic in Skegness. Do you know what I mean? So I mean, it doesn't it doesn't take much to be exotic over there. Let's be fair, people. But no, yeah, it's an interesting one. In your profile, and you refer to yourself as British American, and on your Instagram profile, you have the Nigerian and the Great British flag, but you haven't actually got the American flag, which kind of interested me. I wondered, like, number one, why have you omitted the American flag, and then number two is just like, what does that like British and Nigerian heritage like actually mean for you?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess the reason why, it's funny you say that. Nobody's ever asked me that before. That's a very, very good question. But I'd say the reason why I left out the American flag is, I think, America is a great country, in terms of, opportunity and everything like that. A lot of people claim, to be American. But like I said, I wasn't born in America. I am a citizen there because I've lived there for so long. But I was born in the UK. My parents are Nigerian. Both of my parents are Nigerian. My mom was born in the UK. She was born in London as well. Sorry, she was born in Manchester. In case she's hearing this, let me correct that. But I think. I just didn't see myself as, full on American in that aspect. So anytime if someone asks me, I say, I live in America. I was born in, London, England. But I am Nigerian by descent, So majority of people who see me, they think, they'll just assume because I am American because of my accent. But it's not something that I'll, kind of say that, I am American because it's not my birthplace,
Did it feel like, I don't know how to put this, but almost like in a very weird way, like some sort of like homecoming or something when you were born in London, then kind of moved out to America at a young age. But when you came back to England, even though it wasn't London, but like you're surrounded by, I mean, obviously we were at boarding school together. So a lot of the Nigerian, I think if not, well, almost all of the Nigerian British people that were in the boarding house, they all lived in London originally. So they would like go from London to Skegness. So there's a lot of London culture in the boarding house, even though we were miles away from London. Although your mum, right? It's so funny. Just a little interject here. It's so funny because when I came to visit Dolapo, like when I was 16, it's like 9 years ago now, which feels mental. His mum was calling like his friends, and every time she would talk to her friends and stuff, she'd always be like, "Oh yeah, we've got Sir Seb's over here like visiting," and she'd always say, "Oh, he's from London," and I'd always correct her, be like, "Oh, Miss Adeladan, I'm not from London." And she's like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Lincoln." She's like, "What? How far is that?" And like 3 hours from London. She's like, "Oh, that's London." And I'm like, "Okay, cool, it's London." But yeah, so she probably won't be too upset when you said that she was born in London, because to her, the whole of England's London. But but no, yeah. How did it feel when you came to England? Did it feel like some sort of homecoming? Did you feel like you kind of belonged or something? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it definitely felt. When I first came to Skegness for school, I guess the first few months it didn't feel like school to me. It felt like a vacation because prior to, I would go to, London to visit my cousins. My grandma stays there. I have a lot of aunties and uncles that stay there as well. So, at first it just felt like, okay, this is just a kind of little vacation. Then until it finally set in my mind, I was like, okay, like, this is, I'm here for, kind of like a long-term kind of thing. It felt like, it did feel like home though, because I was already familiar in terms of the culture in a sense, but the only thing different was that I've just never been to Skegness. So learning Skegness, like you said, is kind of like I guess you said the redneck town of
England,
of England, yeah. So in that regard, it was different, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
I wonder when you went back to America, because you came to England you studied in England for like 2 or 3 years, I think. Like you did your GCSEs, and did you do your A levels?
Yeah, I did. I did part of my A levels, and then that's when I came back to.
So how did it feel when you came back to America? Did it take a while to kind of like readjust and like, because obviously the school system as well, just in terms of the way that you're taught and stuff is so different. I remember you telling me that like in England it's a lot more like advanced. You're like, oh man, when I go back to America, I'm going to be like so far ahead of anyone my age and all that stuff. But like, did it feel like did it take a bit of a while to readjust, even though obviously you'd grown up in America and you kind of knew what to expect when you went back?
Yeah, no, it didn't take too much adjustment. Yes, and coming from the UK, Skegness, I feel like I guess the schooling system out there is definitely a little bit more. They focus more on that as opposed to America. They do focus on schooling, but it's more of a equal balance of athletics and entertainment as well. So you come over here, it's like like they're very into education as well, but they're also some aspects, some people might even argue, more into sports and entertainment as well in that aspect. So looking back at it, it wasn't crazy of an adjustment. It just felt, like, okay, like this is just school, here to learn and, get out, graduate, kind of like the same concept. But it was a good move for me though, I think in my eyes. Yeah.
And then to fast forward a bit, like obviously then you were kind of stayed in America, and I mean you're still in America's Texas, and you obviously graduated, and now you got your job, and then fairly in recent history anyway, we should say, like in the last, it feels like years ago now, but it really is like maybe even the last year, there was this whole flare up with the George Floyd incident, and it was not just a national thing in America, but it was really international, and it affected countries that maybe you would think kind of would stay out of kind of race debates. For example, I was telling you before the podcast, in Spain there's not really many black people integrated in society. It's not a topic that comes up much in the national discussion, and yet even here there were marches and so on and so forth. Since then, well, I suppose let's start there, and then how did it feel to be a black man in America at that period of time? It's such a momentous occasion that people will study that'll be history for like our kids.
Black men in America during that time. I guess you just felt more. There's definitely more of a weight in the air, you could say. Whenever you go out, there's kind of looked at a little bit more than normal. But I feel like it was a time to where, for black people, it's the time for us to kind of like stand together as a race, not fighting, one another, but also kind of like trying to understand, why this was happening and, what we could do to kind of move forward to make sure it doesn't happen again. So I feel like that's what everyone's mindset was at the time. It was kind of a place to where, everyone wanted to come together, during that time because of what was going on.
How did it feel? Did you ever talk about it with your parents, like at the home over the dinner table or whatever? I mean, because to me, I can only imagine, like, you've got two parents, like you said, they kind of emigrated from the UK to move to America. Not to say that the UK is like some idyllic place where racism doesn't exist. Of course it does. But they moved they've got two young black male children, like sons, to worry about. And did they ever kind of sit down, have a word with you, or was it ever a point of discussion for you guys as a family?
Oh yeah, it was discussion every every single day, man.
Yeah.
It was definitely, even before that, it's always been a discussion. A black man in America, you always have that talk, like, as a family. And just during this time, it was kind of like, just little I guess tips of advice that, my mom and dad would probably say, before you go out, make sure, you don't stay out too late. If you do run into the law or, police officer, make sure you're respectful. Make sure you don't make any sudden movements, kind of thing, because, during that time, you got police officers that are, they're very trigger happy in a sense. So anything you do that you think that might frighten them or cause some type of an alarm, you try to avoid that. But it's crazy to think that, you're having these conversations, because obviously it's supposed to be with the land of the free, it's supposed to feel free in America, but that's not really the case as a black man, black woman. It's just not, black people in America is it's a little bit different. Racism is definitely a key part of America, and it's been around for a long time. People can even say it was kind of like, the history, if you date it back to history, black people migrating to America, the whole diaspora of things. I feel like that's just what has kind of been it's kind of been drilled in people's minds for a long time. So even white people have been drilled into their minds for a long time on how they perceive black people, and vice versa, how black people perceive white people. So going back to your question, during that time, there were definitely a lot of talks between, my parents, even friends and family, making sure you're a little bit more careful and aware as well during that time.
Go on, Jim. Go on.
Dolapo, can I ask, have you noticed a difference in the frequency of discussion about race with your non-black friends since George Floyd was killed? Do you think that it's really entering more into the average non-white American's head? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I feel like definitely there's been more discussions. You have some people who don't talk about it, who even during the whole time they're just quiet about it. But you have people who spoke up, whether it was through social media or going out in the streets protesting. You could see all those things happening, which is good to see. You had people who weren't black standing up for black people, black rights, and everything like that. Especially to the late George Floyd. Rest in peace to him. Everything that happened with him, it kind of shed a light on a lot of these things. And it's crazy because some people in America, some of the white people in America, weren't really, I guess, aware of how bad it was until the George Floyd incident. Because, there's no denying that, you had the whole video, the whole footage, what was happening. This was the first time, I guess, where people were kind of forced to see the bad side of, justice in America, quote unquote. So that was definitely a thing to where I do think, people that weren't black, they definitely stood up in that time.
I want to know, Zappa, did your dad, did he grow up, was he born and bred in Nigeria originally as a child?
Yeah.
I wanted to know because
he was.
The reason I ask is because I remember at boarding school, obviously the majority were British Nigerian, and they obviously lived in London, and then they would come to Skegness, and and bored there. Obviously, you came from America. I honestly don't know how Skegness like made it to so far. But then we had like people like, you know, shout out to Maiwa and Ade and those types who came straight from Nigeria. And like I remember, like they would say, like in Nigeria, and it makes complete sense, but in Africa and stuff, like race is it just doesn't exist. Just everyone's black. Why would you even? It's just not even a topic. It's only a topic like when they come to the UK or when they go to the US. And so like you were saying how with your, you know, with your parents, it's always been a conversation at the dinner table. Like even before George Floyd, it might just been a bit more amplified now that happened. But like so for your dad, that must have been such a weird kind of transition to be like, oh, I'm born in Nigeria. I grew up in Nigeria and we're just all Nigerians. You don't even see each other as black. You're just humans. And then now you move to America and it's like, oh crap, now like I'm bringing up my children and I have to teach them about this abstract like conception that humanity's made of like, oh, this is a race and because of your skin color, you need to act in a certain way because otherwise you might get in trouble with the police or whoever. Like, have you ever spoken to your dad kind of about that transition or that difference?
Yeah, I mean, he speaks on it, you know, from time to time. It's always going to be, you know, I guess the main thing he would say is that there's always something about this country, America, that when it comes to race, it's just something that's always there. So he knew even when he came from Nigeria to the UK or from Nigeria to America, like, he knew how it was or how it would be, but you know, you don't really know something until you actually experience it. So, you know, during his years of growing up and, you know, kind of learning these things, I guess these were things that he was able to kind of like just be more self-aware about to pass on to us, myself and my brother, to kind of, you know, allow us to not kind of fall into certain mistakes that would kind of get us in trouble, or, you know, luckily, you know, by God's grace, we weren't, you know, put in a position to where we were, you know, in a position like George Floyd. So it was definitely something that for him, it was like a culture shock, you know, but he adapted to it. You know, my mom adapted to it. You know, you live here for so long. It's just one of those things that you just kind of, you know, you just go on with your life, but just you always had that in the back of your mind, like, okay, like, you know, I am, you know, because of my skin color in this country, I have to do things a little bit, you know, differently. I can't be as free, quote unquote, as other people. Yeah.
Did you know, for people who maybe aren't familiar with you and your family, your Nigerian ancestry and heritage is very, very, like, it's paramount. Like, when I came to visit, there was always jollof rice, pounded yam, egusi soup. Like, it's always, do you know what I mean? There was none of this American nonsense.
You got it.
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
You gotta have the culture food.
Yeah, exactly. There's none of that stuff. So, and it's, but, and I love it. And obviously, like, growing up with you guys, I was so lucky that I got to kind of learn from you guys about Nigerian culture, and it's one of the countries that I have like a close affinity to, even if I've actually never visited, to my shames. But I wonder, we all organise that, but I wondered, like, and you spoke about it before, you kind of touched on it, how like in the UK, you know, there's I haven't come across, anyway, I should say that, I haven't come across a black person in the UK who doesn't have an affinity to their ancestry, who doesn't know where it is that their kind of line of the family has come from, and they identify as British, and so they should, and they call themselves English or British or whatever, and they definitely should, and they have a connection to the country, but they'll also be able to tell you, oh yeah, but my ancestors are from Trinidad and Tobago, or like you said, Jamaica or Ghana or, you know, Nigeria, and they have that duality there, which I think is such a great thing. Obviously, I'm lucky enough that I have a duality in nationality as well, and I only think it just enhances people. But
it does.
I think obviously in America, you're kind of maybe a bit more unique in that sense, where I feel, unfortunately, because of, you know, the horrible history that America has, a lot of black people there haven't got that, or they haven't got that affinity to their ancestry. They don't know where it is that they come from. And so they don't have like that connection that you have with Nigeria, for example. How do you think that affects those people living in America? Because, I mean, ultimately, I suppose my point that I'm getting at is, I mean, ultimately, no one can say that America is their country unless you're Native American, right? So whether you're white or black or wherever, like anyone there is basically an immigrant in some form or another. But because white people rule more in America, even though they might have Italian ancestry and Irish ancestry or Dutch ancestry or whatever, they feel as if it's their country because they rule. They're the ones who dominate. Whereas, like, and a black person says, "Oh yeah, I'm American." It's like, yeah, but you're a second-class citizen in America. And I feel like maybe that lack of connection to Nigeria or Ghana, I don't know. I imagine it must leave them feeling lost in some senses.
Yeah. I mean, that's a deep one, Seb.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
I think that's what we're here for. Yes, sir. I think. All right. Let me say this. For black people in America, right? You know, you ask, just using this as an example, if I were to ask somebody in America, a black person in America, and I say, you know, where are you from? Or ask them where they're from. You know, they're gonna say, you know, they're gonna name a state or a city in America that they're from, and I'm speaking to, you know, African American black people in America, so. They're gonna say maybe I'm from Dallas, Texas, or, you know, I'm from California, you know, Atlanta, you know, what have you. If I were to ask that same question to people based in, you know, England, the UK, people that I know in London, you know, they're not gonna say spots or cities in London or in the UK or whatever. They're going to kind of give me a little bit more depth in their answer. So they're going to say, "Oh, I am Ghanaian. You know, I'm Nigerian. You know, I'm Ethiopian or whatever." So I think the lack of knowing where, you know, the actual home country for Black African Americans in America has caused some sort of, I guess, a divide too, because it's like, you know, they know where they're from in America, but they don't really know where they're from, you know, when they trace it back, you know. One thing I would say, though, that I will say is that a lot of people have kind of, because of technology now, a lot of people have, you know, kind of gone on ancestry.com or whatever, and they want to learn where they're from. They track it back and they're like, okay, like, I'm a percentage of maybe Ghanaian, or I'm a percentage of Nigerian, or, you know, whatever it is. They kind of want to learn more about it, but it's not everybody who does that. You know, some people kind of just, you know, fine with not knowing, or they just don't care to know. It's kind of just being, I guess, it's the lack of knowledge in that regards of just not wanting to find out where you're from. But I feel like it's important to know where you're from, and it kind of, I mean, it goes back to why I don't put the, you know, the American flag in my bios or anything like that. You know, yes, I, you know, majority of my time has been in America. Grateful to be in the country. You know, opportunity is great and everything, but you know, myself, I know where I'm from, right? So I'm not gonna say America because I wasn't born here. I'm gonna say that, you know, Nigeria mainly because that's where my parents are from, right? So I think that's very important. You know, if you ask, even if you ask white people in America where they're from, you know, you got white people in America who are, you know, probably you know, maybe they're Irish, or they're from Germany, or, you know, a lot of them, they might not know where they're actually from. They might just think that they're white. And even if they do know, they still try to claim America, you know, as that's theirs kind of thing. And that's where it stems off of, the whole racism. It's kind of like everyone fighting for a land, but they're not really fighting for their own land, which is their country back home. You know, you want to, if you're repping yourself, you want to rep where you're from originally. You know, why are you repping a different country?
Yeah.
It doesn't really make sense, but that's the basis of, you know, how everyone lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think as well, like, that, the African American people who maybe don't know about their ancestry, which is not their own fault, obviously, the majority of people who don't know about their ancestry, it's not because they're willfully ignorant, it's because it's been a horrible history that's led them to such a place where they don't, like, they can't see the wood for the trees, for lack of a better phrase. But do you think that that because then they don't have a certain knowledge about, you know, Ghanaian culture or Senegalese culture or Nigerian culture, like you might, or like our friends back do in London, that they kind of that they buy into the Western imagery of what Africa is, which is like the whole of Africa is this like really poor place, everyone's dying of starvation, that like you just see these, well, the stuff that you see on TV type thing, and it takes like someone either to teach you who knows about their country, because obviously the continent's huge, so I'm not going to kind of put it all in one, but it takes someone who knows about a specific country to teach you about that heritage and that culture, or for you to actually spend time there. But unless you do, like, you kind of buy into this, not nonsense, but buy into this imagery that we're all sold, that every country in Africa is just like needs our help as Westerners, and they're all dying and they're all famished and this, that, and the other. Whereas they don't know that like Nigeria's got like the biggest middle class growing in, like, I think in the world at the moment. Do you think that buys into it as well? And then to what I mean by that is, sorry to add on, that then they might be reticent to then look into their history because they don't want to actually be connected to Africa, because like I don't want. Whereas, you know, people in America are all too happy to say, "Oh, I'm Italian American," because like Italy has like a good marketing. So if you say you're Italian, it's like it sounds like a good thing. Whereas like to an ignorant person, if you say you're Ghanaian or you're Nigerian, it might sound like, "Oh, that's." Oh, I'm sorry, like, do you know what I mean? It's like, no, don't be sorry, it's a great country, but do you know what I mean? Like, because they buy into that Western imagery of Africa, they may be more reticent to actually kind of delve into their ancestry.
Yeah, great question again. I think it's just because there's a disconnect, you know? And like you said, going back to what you said earlier, it's not, it's no fault of theirs too. Like I said, there's information out there, right? You know, we all have we have the internet, there's technology now, there's information out there for you to kind of venture off and kind of learn more about different countries and whatever. So, at the same time, yes, because of, you know, Black people in America and how, you know, the history has been, it's not really no fault of their own for not, you know, being connected to, you know, we use Africa as an example, to be connected to Africa mainly, or even, you know, it's not their fault really, but it's a thing to where it does create some type of separation and between, you know, Africans and African Americans. You know, it wasn't too long ago, I guess, like when I was in middle school here, being African wasn't really like a cool thing, you know. You know, people, you kind of get made fun of because it's like, oh, you guys take, you know, lines, you ride on lines to get to class or whatever, like whatever it is, stupid stuff like that, when it's not even true, you know. Africa has very, very beautiful places. Yeah. Probably I've seen places in Nigeria that look better than places in America. So it's like, it's not even, it's just like I said, people, you know, when I was in middle school, they just didn't know, right? So it's no fault of theirs, but it's just the lack of not knowing, and the disconnect in that regard caused them to think those things. And it wasn't until what was that movie that came out, Black Panther, right? Yeah, it wasn't until Black Panther that really created a shift that allowed people to think that, okay, like, Africa isn't that bad kind of thing. You know, Africa's kind of cool. You know, you have people, rocking the dashikis, wearing more black culture. And, for me, like, I was all for it. A lot of people were like, oh, well, a couple years back, you were making fun of Africans. And now, now it's all cool, but in my eyes, I feel like it's a good thing, it's a good thing to embrace the culture of Africa. Because that's essentially where, majority of people are from that are African American. And it's nice to see. And because of that, it kind of connected us in a different way that hasn't been in like for a while. So that's been good to see. But yeah, to answer your question, there's definitely a disconnect between African Americans and Africans. Sometimes it's maybe jealousy in terms of looking down on Africans, like where like people in America are just better than everybody else, not even Africa, but all countries. They always have that mindset, like America's the best. So it's like Africa can't possibly be where I'm from, right? It's kind of like that mindset that they have. But it's something that is been around for a while, man. But I think it's slowly changing, though. I think it's slowly changing. I think people are being more aware now. People are wanting to know more, which is really, really good. And I love to see it, the growth in terms of, where it was from a mindset perspective and to where it's going now. It's a beautiful thing, because now it's kind of like everyone's, coming together for, the right thing and wanting to learn more about, each other and respecting each other's countries, So, yeah.
Dolapo, I wanted to ask your feelings on like politics, on obviously you can't speak for like the black community's understanding or appreciation of politics or the president, but I remember I did my master's a few years ago, and one of the students was American. He was mixed race, and his dad's family were from the Caribbean. And I remember, like, maybe a few weeks or months ago, we had made this joke, or like we referenced when Kanye West was on TV and he says George Bush doesn't care about black people. And then I remember that this same student was voting for Trump, or told me he voted for Trump. And then I remember we were walking, and I said, "Hey man, I just have to ask you, do you think that Trump cares about black people in America?" And then he like looked at me, he was like, "Man, Trump doesn't care about black people, but I've never felt that the president's cared about black people." And like, that sounds strange considering just previously 8 years you had Barack Obama there. But I guess I wanted to ask your opinion on that, like the influence of Barack Obama as president for you, your family, and your friends, and whether or not you felt, like, I know it's hard to feel even, but like whether you felt that the presidents or like the politicians that are leading your state and your country, whether they actually care about this huge issue.
Yeah. I think when Barack Obama was elected as president of the United States of America, I think that it was a great thing, man. It's like, everyone felt that for once you kind of had the politics side of things. It was in our favor in a sense. There's definitely a sense of kind of like ease in the air during that time. People felt at ease, a lot of comfort, because you had like one of your own in the White House, and it's just it was a time where I think black people in America, black people all over, it was something that was looked at as, okay, like, wow, like, this is what America stands for. I feel like it made America even look better in a sense, because it's like, okay, like, it's the land of the free, land of opportunity. Here you have a black man as president, that's never happened before. Like, it's that kind of thing. It's like black people growing up, it's like you just don't think of it happening. It's like, even when I was growing up, I just didn't think it would happen. I just thought, like, that's just something that is not supposed to happen. So when it did, it's like, whoa, like, okay, this is something that, it kind of opens your eyes to like the possibilities of things. And, it was definitely a time of togetherness, uplifted a lot of people. And I think Obama did a good job in that regard to kind of, bring everyone together in a time that maybe people were feeling separated or in that sense. So yeah, it was a beautiful thing, man. Like when he was president, I remember it just felt very, very good to be in that part of history. Yeah.
I remember when it happened. I remember it was you guys were all at the boarding school, and I remember Tommy, who like is from London, and like she
Shout
was
out to Tommy
like,
one time.
yeah, and she was like, I can't remember if she was crying, but she was like visibly ecstatic. And I like at that time I was maybe 14 or something, and I couldn't get over my head. Like I couldn't get it in my head, and I was like, "But you're not American." I was like, "I understand Dolapo being happy, but like you're not American. Why do you care who's the president of America?" It's only now, obviously, that I've grown up, and it's what you're saying. Like it's not just what it meant for America, but it's what it meant for black people all over the world. That like
exactly
I don't believe this, but what people would say is maybe the most important country in the world, that the fact that a black man can lead that country, doesn't matter if you're from America or not, like that's an important status. But what I would say is, or what I would ask, I should say, is you spoke about how in that time there was like there's an ease in the air, and it was a better, maybe a more relaxed time, should we say, to be a black person in America. But do you think he did enough to actually create long-lasting change after his time in the White House? Because I know that we got the complete opposite with Donald Trump, but it does feel like, okay, Obama's out and now Donald Trump's in, and now any goodwill that was in the air for having a black president is like completely gone, and we're back to how it was before Obama came in, if not potentially like worse, at least from the outside looking in. Like that's how it looked, and maybe as much like I think Obama's a great person, but maybe one of the criticisms, and it is a criticism that I have heard, is that he was a great status and he was a great symbol, but in actual fact, in terms of what he actually did in terms of legislation and the change of culture, maybe he didn't do enough. Maybe that was an opportunity wasted.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this, I don't know what it means or what it feels like to be the president. I'm pretty sure it's a lot of weight, right? You're coming in as the first black man in the White House. Think about it. You're a black man in the White House. Even the name White House, like you're not supposed to be there. So it's like it's definitely a lot, And do I think that he did enough? I think that there's definitely improvements in with everyone. You could always look back and be like, okay, I could have done this differently. I could have implemented this type of change. I could have, implemented some laws as well that could have, stood the test of time, kind of thing. He could have done that, done a little bit more in that regards. But like I said, I don't know what the rules and how much pull he had to implement. Obviously, he's the president. You would think that he can do whatever, right? But I mean, you have checks and balances. You have areas to where like you have to get things passed, in order to create a law or whatever like that. When it comes to the status of things and allowing people to feel at ease and bringing people together, I think he did a great job of that. I think he did a great job as the president. Like I said, he didn't have anything to go off of as being the first black man of America. So I mean, it's easy to criticize and say these things that he could have, done better, which are, it's criticism, which is not bad. It's good to criticize someone on what they could have done to make things better. But like I said, during that time, it's just, you don't know, you don't know what it is, what it feels like to be in the White House, and, what are the things that could have been done differently with respect to him. Like if he could have passed the law, and, people would say yes. People would say like, okay, he could use the momentum that he had, being elected 2 times, and done something. But like I said, uh, overall, I think that he did a very good job. Could there have been things that he could have done better? Yeah, definitely. But I think it was either way, man. I think it was a good thing that America needed during that time. And going back to how you're saying, when Trump was elected and how everything kind of fell to fell to shit, right? I guess what's the word for it? He kind of undid, or everything that President Obama did. And that's just I would say that's just life, man. Life, there's never things that is going to be always constant. You're going to have changes, you're going to have ups and downs. So when someone else comes in that has a different mindset, a different ideology of how he thinks things should be run, things are going to be different. You're going to have people that think like Donald Trump, and they're going to want to, support him on certain things. So they're going to speak out more. When President Obama was president, those people that were, supporting for Trump, their voices were probably a little bit, quieter during that time. But if they have a president like Trump, they're going to speak out. You're going to be like, oh wow, like where did all these people come from? You have a lot of Trump supporters. Things are going to change. It's just how it is. And I think that's just one of the things that people have to be mindful of, is that change is it's always going to happen. But I feel like it's up to you as an individual to know what you think is right, what you think is wrong, what you think you should support and not support. Excuse me. And that should really be your basis on how you kind of like conduct yourself when it comes to, for example, race in America. Just because you have a president that might not, if you have a president at the time that might not be setting a good example, you are your own person, right? So like, even if you have a president, people always get so caught up like, oh, this is the president. Well, you're your own person too, right? So you can make decisions for yourself on what you think is right and what you think is wrong. So just don't follow, be a leader, speak out if something happens and it's not right. And that's just the nature of life, I think. As you get older, you get wise, you kind of learn these things.
Dolapo, I'm fascinated by things that can't be measured, right? And what I feel like when I'm listening to you is that perhaps on the things that can be measured, Obama didn't really do as great as he could have done, say for Black America, right? But on the things that can't be measured, i.e. like the pride or the safety that you feel walking down the street, or the fact that you see your friends and you think, hey, we actually could be president. And that's impossible to measure what that could do for a whole generation of Black people. Whereas I remember Trump was like bragging about how Black employment was higher under his presidency compared to Obama. Things that can be measured, but on things that can't be measured, again, this kind of fear, this trepidation, the fact that that George Floyd was killed under Trump, and that Trump was he was found wanting in terms of his response. He took days to visit the city. His response was kind of neutral in terms of defending some of the, it was, and these things, they're really hard to measure, but you can feel them. You know what I mean? Like I mean, you can tell me because I wasn't in America at the time, but I'm fascinated by that. Sometimes things that can be measured take the headlines, but there are things that can't be measured that are often just as significant.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to look at it, actually. The things, like you said, going back, the things that can't be measured, I think Barack Obama did an extraordinary job in that regard, right? And sometimes it's the things that can't be measured that really make an impact on people, because we're people first. You can rep whatever, wherever you're from or what laws you believe in, but you're people first. So if someone is able to make a profound impact on you within yourself, right, you're definitely going to that's going to take a toll on you, and it's going to allow you to act a different way. Going back to what you said, President Obama, a lot of black people are like, wow, like possibilities, right? So you probably have, young black people growing up, they want to be the next president, right? That probably wasn't even a thing for them. They never thought that before. You have people thinking, okay, like, wow, like this is a black man in America. Even if this person isn't black, they're gonna look like, okay, this is a black man in America. He did this. I can do. That means whatever I want to do in my life, I can do it too. It uplifts people, right? So those are things that can't be measured. But going back to the things that can be measured, yeah, those are the things that take the headlines and the news and all that stuff. But sometimes those things are skewed a certain way to fit people's ideologies and people's their standards, and they want to push that out to the public. That's definitely a great way of looking. I've never actually looked at it at that way, or kind of like had a formal way of saying it. The things that can be measured versus the things that can't. So yeah, so that's a nice way, man. Good job, Jim.
Dolapo, before we finish up, I wanted to ask. I'm a firm believer that the only way something changes a situation is that the person or the group of people or the demographic that are guilty in inverted commas are the ones that have to make the change. So it shouldn't be up to the oppressed to try and change a situation. It should always be the oppressor. Now, as a white straight male, that leaves me with a lot of world problems to fix. But what I mean by that is that, like if we look at racism, right? It's not for black people to teach white people how to think and what to think and how to speak and what words we can use and what words we can't use and how to make black people comfortable. It's not for black people to teach that. It's for white people to ask those questions, to do their own research, to do the reading. If I think of homophobia, it's not for gay people in the LGBTQ community to teach straight people how to think and act, and it's for the straight people to kind of suss that out for themselves and do the hard work themselves, right? And I think a lot of us, we kind of think of it as like, oh, racism, that's a black problem. Homophobia, that's a gay problem. Sexual abuse, that's a female problem, right? And so we kind of, it's a bit, as Joe Rogan would say, it's a bit squirrely, but by doing that is they're pushing the onus on the oppressed rather than the oppressors taking up. Now, I'm not racist, but that doesn't mean that, because I'm not racist, racism isn't my problem, so I can just leave it. Like I form part of the demographic, unfortunately, through no fault of my own, but I do form part of the demographic that is the oppressor in this system. And like I said, as a straight white male, I kind of feel like I form the demographic of every oppressor. But hey, there's good things as well. There's definitely good things. But what I'm saying is that, like, for you, how would you like, because there might be white people who are listening to this who have had very little contact with black people or people from other cultures just in general. It doesn't have to be black. It could be just literally a white person, but that isn't from England or from wherever they're listening to this from, right? And they probably think, but I have no exposure. I don't know where I could even learn about, for example, Nigerian culture. Like, I was very lucky. I went to boarding school. I was living with you guys. I had no choice but to become one of you guys and learn from you guys, right? But people maybe aren't as lucky as me and don't have those experiences. So I don't know, like, how to ask this question, but what do you think it is that we as white people could do that can actually make a real change, instead of just going, oh, that's racism, that's a black person's problem, or it's a black problem, rather than actually take the onus on ourselves? Like, is it just trying to reach out? Is it just trying to have conversation, not necessarily about race, but just like not be scared to kind of maybe instead of going to your local fish and chip shop if you're in the UK, maybe just eat out at an African joint and just talk to the waiter and like learn about African culture through that way if you're a real foodie. Or like if you're a music person, like maybe start to listen to some Afro beats instead of just listen to like heavy metal and try and, do you know what I mean? Like there's different ways. I'm not saying that you have to go up to a black person on the street and just be like, hey, can you teach me about racism? That's not what I'm trying to say. But like, because you'll get a slap in the face, and rightly so. But yeah, what do you are there like ways, like proactive ways that you think white people who are actually willing to make a change can make that change?
Yeah, I'd say the way, you know, white people can make a change is to really speak out on these matters and not stay quiet, right? And I guess I'll kind of answer this question, and I guess in two parts. So like the first part, I'm gonna, you know, I raise like an example. For example, like if you know, you're walking down the alley, you're walking down the street, and you see, let's say you see someone on the street getting beaten up, pummeled, right? There's a group of people, just one person, and they're getting beaten up. Typically, you know, the right thing to do is to, you know, try to, you know, analyze or assess the situation. And if it's something that's, you know, terribly bad, you're going to try to stop it, right? If you see someone, a woman, and some guy's trying to mug her, you know, tries to rape her, you're not going to stand back and watch, right? You're gonna go up and at least, you know, notify the authorities, or, you know, the police, call for help to help out. So using those examples, it's kind of the same thing. Like if you, even though you are not the person that's being hurt, you know, you're gonna try to help out. So like if you have a race, you know, black people, and there's things that are going on, injustice, how can you help? The thing that you don't want to do is just to keep quiet and just keep watching. There has to be ways to help. So like, I think that's the thing that is lacking. And it might be lacking because of, like you said, they don't know how to go about it. But then again, like, it's just common decency to want to help, or want to, you know, kind of make a difference. If things, you know what's good, and you know what's bad. You know, we know these things. So if something bad is happening, you want to, you know, kind of mitigate that and try to help out, you know, any way you can. So I'd say speaking up on certain situations. A good example that you just said is maybe if you want to learn more about, you know, black culture, you know, go to different environments that you typically wouldn't go to. Try to, you know, learn more about black culture in that aspect. Maybe you might go to a restaurant and they're serving majority maybe soul food, and you're in that area, you're in that space. You kind of, you know, see how people interact. You engage in conversation. You know, it's all about being social, engaging in conversation, and learn a little bit more about, you know, the side that you don't know. You know, instead of just listening to what you hear on the news and listening to, you know, your friends or what they think of, you know, a different race. Go out and see for yourself and ask these questions. Like there's knowledge on, you know, in the internet. There's places you can go, but it's just like with anything. Like if it's just, you know, some people might not want to do that. You have white people that just don't want to get to know black people. So it's just like I just see it as, you know, if it's like that, then it's just something that if you don't want to do that, then you don't want to see change. And then, you know, you're kind of in that other category of why the country is the way that it is when it comes to race. But it's just like if you travel, if you're foreign in a different country and you travel somewhere, you know, you're Italian and you go to France, or you're France and you go to Nigeria, or, you know, you go to America. People want to travel to experience different things and learn different things, right? So why wouldn't you do that about a race that is hurting, right? Why wouldn't you want to learn more about them, and kind of try to see, you know, what you can do, you know, within yourself to kind of, you know, make that change, whether it is you have black friends. If you don't have black friends, there's definitely ways you can still speak up about it. There's social media, you can, maybe there's an article that you kind of, that resonated with you. You can reshare it. It's all about conversation. And the thing that happened with George Floyd is it did a lot of that. It did a lot of allowed people to kind of speak up on certain matters that they typically wouldn't speak up on, and allowed them to have these conversations with different people and try to see that, okay, why is this happening, and what can I do to make a difference. So yeah, that'd probably be my answer on that. Just speaking up on things, learning more about the culture, anything you can do to make a positive impact on someone. Yeah, Jim. Got you. Oh yeah, he's been asking the hard ones. Both of y'all been throwing haymakers. Throwing haymakers.
Dolapo, I can't let you go without asking you a very difficult question. Not that Seb hasn't already been asking you difficult questions. Seb be going deep. I wanted to ask. I mentioned before the podcast, I listened to an interesting podcast today. I've heard this a few times. Why, we can't ignore that there's a section of the white population that are not overtly racist, but are not incredibly sympathetic when the conversation about race comes up. They're not going to do anything out of their day-to-day to kind of promote the fact that there is drastic inequality in this regard. And I'm of the belief that this has a lot to do with some of a lot of this demographic feeling yeah, I can't deny that these inequalities or injustices occur. However, I feel a bit I've been on the receiving end of some unfair, not call it karma, I don't know if you will, unfair events as well. I don't know, my dad fell into addiction. I grew up in poverty. My uncle was an immigrant, or my dad was an immigrant, but he wasn't an African American immigrant. I still had to struggle like that. And I feel it's my belief that a lot of the people who don't, like you said, actively share an article or go and try and engage with the different cultures and learn more and share more and connect more, is that they feel a bit disgruntled that they haven't kind of received hey man, I feel you, or I hear you in the same regard. And I wonder, does that make sense to you, or do you have a different opinion as to why there is a very steady, a very significant percentage of the white population that they're not overtly racist, but again, they're not really actively trying to improve the situation?
Yeah, great question. I think I feel like it comes down to just not wanting to deal with it. That when you have people thinking like that, they're really just trying to, they're aware of the situation, but they're more concerned of their well-being. So they're thinking why should I go out of my way, to do this? Or why should I care? I have responsibilities. I went through hardship in my life. It wasn't all roses. Just because I'm white doesn't mean I had a good life, which is true. You have white people that went through hard times, definitely went through hard things. And that can't, you can't take that away from a person, So some people will feel okay, you have, Black Lives Matter. And people will say, well, I matter too. White lives matter too, right? But what I would say to that is that's just, it's kind of, how can I say, you're kind of deviating from the bigger picture. We all are living on this earth, and, everyone has their own problems. Everyone has their own issues. If we were to all just turn a blind eye to everything that bad was happening, the world would be in a bad place right now, right? there has to be things that are done that you have to do to, to make a difference, even if it's not within your nature and you feel like you have more stuff going on in your life that you don't care about another person's. And if you're thinking like that, it's just for example, if someone's, it's like seeing a house that's on fire and it's burning down, and you have people in it, it's burning down, and you're gonna say, well, I'm not gonna help out, but
my house is down the street.
yeah, my house my house down the street, mine's also it's not in good condition either, right? But you have a house that's on fire, but you're gonna be like, no, I'm not gonna help because I have my own house to look after, right? If you have that mindset, it's not a good mindset to have. You think you have to be willing to kind of see the other side of things, and also you have to look at history, man. You have to look at history, and you can't compare the hardships of Black people in America to your own hardship, because it goes down years and years and years and years of oppression, and years of, like, imagine, I try to ask this question to people, like, imagine walking around as a Black man in America for, try to do it for a week and see the difference compared to how your lifestyle was, you're as a white person, speaking of black on white right now. So it's like, if you were to do that for a week, you'll see the difference. It's like, it's night and day. Like, it's completely different on how you're treated, there's little things, the way you're side-eyed on certain things. If you're out in public, and if you're in a store, someone might think, oh, you're trying to steal. Or if you're, if you're wearing a hoodie at nighttime, oh, you must be going to rob some place. But if a white person's wearing a hoodie at nighttime, they're going for a jog. Like, it's just, it's different things to where you would definitely be able to pick up on if you were in that person's shoes. So when certain situations that are happening like this with race, you want to understand and kind of see the bigger picture. You have to see their side, be willing to see their side. I'm all about being able to kind of see the other person's perspective. Like, like, even if someone was coming to me and a white person said to me, like, hey man, like, I'm going through troubles too. Like, I got this, and this. I'll listen, I'm not going to just turn a blind eye to. I'm like, okay, I understand, but let me tell you my part too. So, like I said, conversation. You have to be able to understand each race, understand the person, and not just feel like you're not better than, but like the lack of not caring. That's just it's just not a good trait, And if people continue to have that trait, things are not going to change. And I feel like that's a big thing that you touched on, that people should do, is to look at the bigger picture and see why is this happening, and try to see, like, okay, maybe what I was thinking before wasn't right, and how can I fixate my mindset to how they're feeling. So
yeah,
that's it. Because you would think it's a possibility for them to use their own difficulties as like a portal or a method of understanding the difficulty that let's say, like, Black Americans are going through. So instead of, oh, I have my own shit, like, I'm worrying about my own shit, go, oh, this person also is struggling. I can relate to that. It's difficult. It's hard. I need help. We all need help.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just want to say as well, like, anyone who says, like, white lives matter too as like a rebuttal to Black Lives Matter is, like, so, I'm going to be polite here, but, like, it's so grossly understanding what Black Lives Matter really means. Because when someone says Black Lives Matter, what they're actually saying is Black Lives Matter too. Because we all know white lives matter, because they're the ones that get treated like first class. So when the Black says Black Lives Matter, what they really mean is Black Lives Matter too, because we all know white lives matter. So when you go around and say, oh yeah, but white lives matter, it's not as if the black people are saying, like, kill white people because Black Lives Matter. It's the most ludicrous statement It drives me insane, that white lives matter too thing, or like all lives matter or whatever, because it's just, I actually think it's willful ignorance. It's willfully, I don't think anyone actually believes that when they say white lives matter, they actually believe that like black people are advocating for the ill will of white people.
Yeah.
And
And it's
do you
not
know what I
like
mean?
that.
It's not like that. It's just like we want to get on an equal playing ground. So, and I
That's it.
think as well
Yeah.
that what, and me included in this, there's a sketch that I'm going to include on the audio version of this. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please search this up on YouTube. But I think actually it's, I think Muhammad Ali is being interviewed by Parkinson in the UK. This is like in the 70s or something. And he says this like, it's not a skit, but he says this like little bit in a jokey way. But when you actually like listen to what he's saying, it really hits hard. But he said like, he was a kid and he asked his mum, because to go back to something you said before, you're like a black president in the White House. It doesn't sound right. And so Muhammad Ali was saying this when he was getting interviewed. He was like, how come, he was like saying that when he was a kid, he was asking his mum, he was like, Mama, how come it's the White House? And how come Santa Claus is a big man with a white beard and he gives presents to all the kids? And how come it's black male? White people lie too, and white people are bad too, but it's called black male. And how come
You know what I'm saying?
the black cat is the unlucky cat? Like you don't want to cross the road when a black cat's crossed the cat, and this stuff. And he gives more examples, right? And the way Muhammad Ali is, he kind of says it, and it gets a kind of an awkward laugh because we're like, white people are like, oh shit, he's got a fucking point. But let's just like awkwardly laugh here because they do the polite British laugh or whatever. But it's like, the point he makes is a really good point, because I think even if you're not racist, you can very easily fall into the trap of like anything that's black, even if we're not talking about humanity, but like just black in general is kind of considered a negative thing. So like in yin and yang, the good part is the white part and has a little black spot, which is the bad part, and then the bad part is the white. Do you know what I mean? And it's like all of these things, and it's just like how I think as white people we have to really concentrate and do a bit of self-analysis and try to really kind of unwire those things that we have been unconsciously brought up with. So even little things like blackmail, it's a very bad thing. No one wants to be blackmailed. But why is it called blackmail? Why couldn't it be called grey mail or orange mail or some shit? I don't know. Like, do you know what I mean? And this,
like I said,
it all buys into, like you were saying, it all buys into this negative imagery that you have when you see a black person or whatever, because you're kind of just brought up with this vernacular which is just inherently negative, whereas white is seen as is the color of peace and the color of hope and yada yada yada. And it sounds silly, but like it really does add up. And I think like we need to, even if you're not racist and even if you're very well you're very well adjusted to the African culture, you know a lot about African culture as a white person, you hang around with a lot of black people, a lot of black people are your best friends, you see them on a daily. That's not enough to be like, oh, I'm not racist. Like, you have to really kind of untap and really work on yourself to see those little things that kind of just creep in there through no fault of your own, but they do creep in there nonetheless.
No, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Seb. The fact that it is conditioning, and that I think a lot of white people feel like guilty, and they feel the shame around the guilt. But like you said, it's in the culture. I heard someone say something like, "I'm like this because it's the air that I breathe." You know, as in, it's almost impossible to grow up in a Western country and not pick up something that is more or less racist. And like you said, it's not something to like beat yourself up about it, but it is something to actively question and inquire about.
Yeah, exactly right. Like you said, it's impossible to grow up without some of those things infiltrating your system, but it's definitely possible to get rid of those things if you work hard enough, right? And I think that's the excuse that some of us give ourselves as white people, is like, oh, but you know, I grew up in this society and it's not my fault. I don't choose what goes on the news, and I don't choose the words and the imagery that they use in the newspapers, and that's true. But you can choose to work on it and to like kind of rid yourself of that imagery, and when you read those words, to be a bit skeptic and be like, is that really the case, or is this another case of the news painting a black person as, you know, whatever, a gangster or this, that, and the other, when actually, if this was a white person, would they use the exact same adjectives and vocabulary? Maybe not. And like to have a skeptical eye about things, and that's definitely a possibility if you put in the hard work, and it's definitely something worth putting in the hard work for. But yeah, Dapper, I'm really grateful that you came onto this podcast. It's been a long time in the making. We tried to do this about a year ago. I feel like we say this to every guest now with COVID, but but it is true. But hey, maybe it's like wine. Maybe it aged like fine wine, and maybe the podcast is all the better for it. But thank you so much for coming on.
Oh no, for sure. Yeah.
And Dolapo, please let me know the next modeling gig you have, and tell your friends that you have a very good Irish friend with some sexy hands, and I'm willing to do rings, watches. Let me know.
Sexy hands, I got you, man. I got you. Yeah, man.
And if they're ever looking for,
I appreciate it.
For anyone who's, you know, short, stocky, receding hairline, if that's ever their shtick, then you know who to call. You know, people don't always want to see a six-pack and chest, right? Sometimes they just want to see, you know, a different type of belly, and I can provide that, a bit of diversity in the modeling scene. You know.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's all about diversity. I would love to see a photo shoot of me and Dolapo together, just him there chiseled, and then just me like hairy and just like fat, just stood opposite. It'd be like, it'd be like the worst before and after you've ever seen. But
I just want to say thank you, you know, Seven Jim, for having me on the Earthly Delights podcast. You know, I enjoyed it a lot. This was definitely fun. You know, having deep conversations like this, I think it's needed. You guys do a great job of this. I've heard, you know, your past episodes that you've had as well, and you know, keep on going. You know, don't stop. I feel like this is something that's needed. And like you know, just, you know, you guys are two white males, you know, from different countries, right? But you guys are, you know, you're coming together and you know, bringing people together for a greater cause, because you don't have to do this, right? But you're doing it, and that's what's beautiful about it. And I feel like, you know, platforms like this definitely need more respect, and you know, applaud for you know, for what you're doing. So thank you, for allowing people to share their stories and all of that. So keep going, don't stop.
I appreciate it. That's the best review you've ever got. I'm gonna maybe that might be our new jingle at the start of every podcast. It just comes into that. But yeah, man, I appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you.
Hi guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. Every review helps us climb the podcast charts so that even more of you can listen to our amazing guests. We really appreciate the support. Remember to tune in next week. But until then, keep safe and have a good one.